the Flashpoint has just been announced, but more importantly, I'm very happy about something else. Not only do I have MonteCristo with me, I have him here with his quintessential wine glass right in front of him as well. And let's be honest, no Counter-Strike broadcast should ever be featuring MonteCristo without a glass of wine right next to him. It's the adult show that they're going for, and you're starting off nicely. Monty, how does it feel to be out of the tyranny of a developer?
It feels honestly amazing. I think my experience with developers has been positive in many ways, where you get direct access to talk to the development teams, but at the end of the day, developers are good at one thing, and that's developing games. It's not creating broadcasts or broadcast products, and so I think they should do what they're good at and let me be good at what I'm good at. I don't go and tell the developers, hey, I think you should make the game this way, so I don't want anybody telling me how to make the broadcast.
But you do want to be telling some people how to do Counter-Strike, and that's kind of what we're looking forward to over here. And one thing we were talking about earlier, Monty, is that you think, and this is his words, not mine, also mine, that the Counter-Strike stats are terrible right now. What kind of things do you think other games have that CS doesn't?
So, to be clear, I'm not telling Counter-Strike how to do things. I am talking with Counter-Strike experts to get better products there. So really what I'm doing as a whole, as a part of being part of Flashpoint, is allowing other people to take the lead and then applying my knowledge from other games that will help them provide the best information possible, whether that is, or provide the best product possible, whether that's the format, whether that's the shoulder content we're making, whether that's the broadcast flow. But at the end of the day, almost everything that I'm doing is talking to my colleagues who are experts in this field and figuring out how we can improve what they do according to their own metrics. So when you talk about stats, a lot of the time I've been talking to people like Moses and Anders and Sean Gares and Thorin about where are stats lacking, because right now, to me, I look at literally any other game I've been a part of, there are very robust public stats databases, or in Blizzard's case, private stats databases, and I think in general, Counter-Strike stats are not very compelling, and they're not telling a very good story right now, so my goal is to talk to those guys and figure out what is missing, and then figuring out how we can get that information.
Well, your role is obviously, that's a little bit more back-end. Yeah. Towards the front of things, I'm going to quote Thorin over here, which is, I'm going to misquote him probably, but I'm going to try to quote Thorin over here, which is that he said that Monty's not an analyst right now, but give him a year and he will be. Because that's just how good he is at picking things up. That's the kind of hard work we're going to see. And so far, everything you've said has been saying that you're leaning towards more of a hosting position than anything else. Do you think that we could feasibly see that transition happening, or would you just prefer being a host?
I don't think I can help myself from doing analysis, I think, is the answer to that question. I obviously have a long way to go right now, but I think that by being with some of my friends and colleagues for an extended period of time, being able to lean on people like Thorin and Moses that I've known for a number of years to ask questions and really get the knowledge, as well as, frankly, I mean, the way I do things is I just grind tape. I grind an insane amount of tape, and so with enough demos, with tools like Skybox and other tools that we're seeing being developed right now, I think that my expertise in esports as a color commentator has always been around macro play, around rotations, around ability usage. It's never been my strength to do things like micro interactions, because that's more of a pro player thing, knowing exactly, so for example, if you're familiar with League of Legends, like the niceties of lane matchups, not ever really my strength. But if you talk about vision, if you talk about rotations, if you talk about map movement, if you talk about team tendencies, if you talk about stats in any of these games, these are all my wheelhouse. And if you give me enough time with tape and enough access to knowledgeable people, I can figure it out.
All right, so Samla is ready to go back to desk hosting next year, is basically what Monty's trying to say.
Samla's an excellent desk host.
He is an excellent desk host. He's been proving that very well over at Blast, especially these days. But Monty, another thing that I have to ask you about is something a little bit more serious. It's about financials, which is that you've been working with the Overwatch League. And here's the thing about a lot of these franchise leagues. You can say whatever you want about their financials and their business models and about, as Thorin was saying, not my words, potential corrupt practices and whatnot. But the fact of the matter is they have, and I'm going to use what I think is a league term, which is they have a win condition. So for the Overwatch League, it was that they've got homestands, they're going to sell tickets to homestands. Those tickets are going to be the kind of bread and butter for these teams coming in. We've seen a lot of things about how the entertainment product is going to be there, etc., but we don't see a monetary win condition from B-side, from Flashpoint rather. Do you think you can tell us what that should look like in a year, in a couple of years, whatever the time frame is?
Sure. Obviously, the ownership group has run a lot of projections off of this, and I think that the issue that they're primarily trying to solve in Counter-Strike right now is that there are two entities that are winning in Counter-Strike. The players, first off, are winning big time. Players are doing great. Players are being treated very well, which is awesome. I support, obviously, the players being treated well and getting paid a lot of money. Now, the other organizations that are winning are broadcasters, because they are taking profit, and who is getting squeezed here is the teams. So I think the concept here is really that if the teams can cut out as many middlemen as possible, including, excuse me, I burped into the microphone very rudely, including the middlemen that exist in terms of the production world, then we're getting into a place where we might reach sustainability for the teams. And realistically, most traditional sports teams have ownership stakes in their respective leagues. They are collaboratively owned by the teams, and they sell those broadcast rights to television stations or other production companies, right? And I think that is a much more stable way of generating revenue for the teams and the players, and also, obviously, the production companies and the television channels have figured out a way to make that work in terms of selling their own commercials and other rights against that. So I would rather move towards that. That is a traditional sports model that I actually like, and I think that it's healthier to move in that direction.
Well, again, what you're saying is something that's been espoused in the past as well by Dan Fidan on the By the Numbers, I think is episode 103, if you guys want to go check that one out, which is that you're cutting out the middleman, and that percentage is what's going to allow teams to lean into profitability. But even though you said that the broadcaster is the one winning, so to speak, they're really not. In Counter-Strike at the very least, where we're seeing like a significant losses coming through. So there has to be some sort of additional revenue generation in the eyes of a lot of people. Are they wrong, or is this something where there's just some misconceptions coming out that you'd like to correct?
Well, I obviously can't comment too deeply on other people's business models that I do not have all the information about, right? And clearly we've seen some drops in, say, ESL or MTG, I should say, stock price recently with the fallout over the Huya deal. They are a publicly traded company, so you do actually see some level of financial reports from them. But at the end of the day, if the teams can actually control their own sponsorships and the sponsorships of the league, then and also sell the media rights, then it makes a lot more sense for the teams just to do it themselves on behalf of the league. Because I don't think that in our case, having a production partner is really offering a valuable service, because we can just do that ourselves.
Well, you're talking a bit about media rights, and that's a discussion that has come up very recently as well in other regards. And in what regards it comes in the concept of the ESL Pro Tour. And this is where Carmack, who is the VP of...
Yes, he's
he's one of the VPs in ESL, and Ulrich Schulze, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that name, but both of them also in another recent episode of By the Numbers, which is episode 105, bless you, Richard Lewis, they both discussed about how, in ESL's opinion, and in their opinion from what they were saying, it's very difficult to sell media rights in what is a buyer's market where there isn't some sort of a large-scale monopoly coming through, which is what they're trying to go for, which is something that's an open secret at this point. Why does Flashpoint think that it can do what they can't?
I think they should ask themselves how Overwatch League was able to sell itself for $45 million a year, first off, right? Because I think one thing Overwatch League has done exceptionally well is sell sponsors and sell media rights. I also think, to be frank, I do understand that it can be hard to sell media rights right now, because it's hard for the streaming services to make the money back. Frankly, if I'm honest, and I am not saying that Flashpoint is going to do this at all, we are not going to do this. Just my opinion on esports overall is that I never had a problem when I was watching Brood War or when I was watching StarCraft 2 on GOM TV paying $20 a month for content. Like, I think pay-per-view is actually the best model for all esports in order to make it sustainable, because the amount of content you get, like if you subscribed on Twitch to your favorite tournament provider's channel, those $5, think about how much content you're getting. You're getting 40, 50 hours of content from one league alone in a given month if you're watching Overwatch League more, if you're watching Overwatch League or LCS, right, or a Riot channel. So I think it's a very small price to pay if it's providing the bulk of your entertainment in the same way that I pay for Netflix or I pay for HBO or any of the other streaming services that I personally pay for. I don't have a problem doing that. And I also didn't have a problem doing that when I was a broke college student watching StarCraft. So I think that would be a better model for the entire industry to move towards. Now, that's not feasible, and that's definitely not what Flashpoint is going to do. I want to make that super clear. Definitely not what Flashpoint's going to do. But I understand some of the struggles that are involved in the industry, and honestly, I wish we could move towards that, because I think it would turn a lot of stuff around.
Well, the other thing that is obviously going to be there is sponsorships. And there's a very convincing argument to be made for sponsorships increasing in Flashpoint, which is that you've got these teams like Cloud9 behind them, MIBR, Cloud9's got their Puma deal. They've got a lot of these record-breaking sponsorships, which are just fantastic to see. And these are obviously some of the best people in the world at selling sponsorships. So it just makes logical sense to have them. But you're also potentially closing some doors that have been open for a very long time in esports by trying to make it an adult market. Do you think that sort of offsets with each other?
No, because I think that the adult market for esports grows bigger and bigger every single year. So as long as we keep doing this, the pool of people interested continues to grow, because more people who are used to esports grow up and want an adult product. So I think that's actually a pretty easy win. I also think that something people are overlooking is the fact that what ESL can't do, well, they have sort of their weird agency or whatever, but what most broadcasters can't do is they can't come in and say, hey, sponsor, how about you sponsor our league and then all of the teams in our league at the same time, right, for a much larger package deal. And I think if the teams are operating the league, what they can do is they can say, hey, sponsor, what if you sponsored the league, but also all of our individual Counter-Strike teams, which is something that Overwatch has done with sort of exclusive sponsor categories to create larger deals. So I think in that case, there's actually more of a win here, because there isn't that difference or that conflict between the teams trying to sell sponsors against certain broadcaster numbers and then the production company trying to sell sponsors against those broadcast numbers. You can bring it all together.
That's an interesting concept. That's not something that we've seen discussed very much, and I'm sure that we have to give it some time before.
Yeah, it might not happen, right? But at least it's an option, right? At least it's an option.
No, of course, absolutely. It's food for thought for now, at the very least. But back to something a little bit more directly related to the broadcast, which is that OGN has been historic in what they've done. And for context, for all of the Counter-Strike fans who are watching, I'm sure Monty will do a much better job of explaining it than I possibly can, but they have pioneered things like hype videos, things like trash talking in a region like South Korea, of all of them. What are you bringing to the table from OGN, keeping in mind that even Riot Korea has not really been able to replicate those kind of hype videos, those kind of content pieces? Are you going to be the one to be able to do what OGN did in Counter-Strike in the West?
That would be bold of me to say. So to be clear, I have such an immense respect for OGN, and especially Crisis We, the producer that was basically the pioneer of esports in Korea on OGN. He started in the late 90s. He produced 40 seasons of the OSL. He was the executive producer for my first few years at OGN before he went to work with Banana Plan in China, which is another esports production company that did a lot of the LPL stuff. But he basically is the most experienced and skilled esports producer on the planet. So shout out to Crisis, amazing guy. I will say that one of our goals is to create OGN-style hype videos. That's a project that I have taken on, and I am doing my best to direct that kind of content. I hope we're able to get there in the end. I think I have a really cool concept for this season, and I hope we're able to execute on it. I don't want to overpromise in case it doesn't happen. But if it doesn't happen this season, it will happen in the future for sure. But we're pretty far along with this one, so that's definitely something that I want to bring. And also just a lot of, honestly, OGN's broadcast tone where they do a lot of fun or silly things with the players, but then they show them in the super serious hype video light. This is kind of the balance and the sort of tone that we want to strike with this. Because I think what OGN did very well was it balanced opposites really nicely. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot from 5 years there, so I'm hoping to bring that over to CSGO.
That's obviously something that we're all very excited about. But now, just to touch on the balance very quickly, and this is going to be my final question, which is that everything we've heard about Flashpoint, from the branding with big, bold, bright red colors, down to the fact that Thorin's involved, so it's big, bold, bright red people, but it's where we understand that a lot of it has been pitched as a UFC, WWE, fighting content type of thing. Does that not clash with things like, slightly sillier, gimmicky things that we've seen, succeed very often in Counter-Strike, including in things like CS Summit and whatnot?
No. I mean, I actually think that CS Summit recently, one of the things that I enjoyed most was the skit that they did with the ultrasound on Prius, which I thought was hilarious with Machine and Henry. And the lead producer that we've brought on, Sean Keegan, is from Overwatch League, and he's also a former UFC producer. And if you watched Watchpoint, which was our standalone show in Season 1, so not the pre-show in Season 2 or the post-show, but if you watch specifically the studio show that we did in Season 1, where we did a bunch of the skits like what you saw at CS Summit. So this is I'm going to tell you, he is one of the producers on this show. He did these skits, and he also is a UFC producer. And let's be real, we can say that UFC is edgy, but isn't there something inherently silly about Conor McGregor? He's not yeah, he's a badass, but come on, he's wearing a pinstripe suit where the pinstripes say "fuck you." That's silly. If I put Conor McGregor in a skit where he was being funny, it would be funny, right? If anything, the UFC should do that, in my opinion. So I think there's a balance that we're trying to strike there, and we literally have a guy who writes great esports skits, who has done UFC content, who is running a lot of the creative production behind this show. So that's exciting to me.
I know I said that's the last one, but this is a follow-up I need to have, which is that you talked about Watchpoint, and that's something that I actually completely forgotten about. But can we expect to see something similar to that in terms of a standalone show? Not necessarily for skits. It could even be just so that the analysts can go out there and flex the big boy muscles over there about how much they know about the game. Can we expect to see that early on?
We definitely want to do skits. I think that Sean is incredible at making this kind of content, if you've seen Watchpoint. And Devil Monty and all that stuff came from, which was, I think, super funny. So we definitely want to lean into that. But that said, I think a lot of our pre-show and post-show, the aim we're going for right now is more of a loose, free-form feel. So I think we're going to be going much more jazz than super structured.
Sorry, just to clarify, is there going to be an independent show similar to Watchpoint from a studio and whatnot, is what I meant?
I don't know if we've landed on that one yet. We're definitely going to be producing pre-shows and post-shows. We definitely want to do a lot of these skits. Whether those skits are pre-recorded and we're inserting them in the broadcast, or they are incorporated into a more free-form pre-show or post-show in the way that if you saw Watchpoint being very structured and incorporating the skits, this would be much more loose but incorporating the skits. It's definitely a different tone, so I don't want to commit to saying that we're going to be doing live-to-tape style production, because I think it's mostly going to be live production, but with some of those elements.
Well, that's been MonteCristo, the man who somehow managed to get himself into another game, but for potentially the first time.
I'm trying to be the first guy to do a CSGO major, League World Finals, and an Overwatch League final. And then if I can do the international, that's like the EGOT of esports casting. So
Monty, we love you, but Dota definitely will not. I'm sorry to break that one to you, but we've got another villain in Counter-Strike, and that's exactly what we needed. The hype train is here, and MonteCristo, GG Intel, signing off for now.